again, welcome to episode 13 of the Carolyn Glick Middle East News Hour. And as usual, I'm joined by my co-host, Gadi Taub. Hey, Gadi.
13. Wow, we're
13.
We're
Lucky
adults.
number.
We're adults right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like my kid just turned 12 this week, and we have
So
1
we're
year to
older.
the bar mitzvah. We're older. We're at the bar mitzvah of our show, right? Anyway, so we have a lot to talk about. There was a major drama in the Knesset today, and I mean last night, early morning hours of today, Tuesday, and I woke up to the news, and it was the first time that I smiled in a long time upon hearing the morning news. So why don't you start talking about what happened?
How do you say simcha laed beAnglit?
Oh, it's Schadenfreude. It's German. There's no proper English term for it, but
because
basically,
the English speaking peoples are too polite to have it. But it's like you're happy to see the misery of another. That's basically it.
It's pure sadism.
So there was a huge drama. How do we set it up? There is a coalition now in which two very small, allegedly right-wing parties are in cahoots with the left, the extreme left, the anti-Zionist left, and the Muslim Brothers. And in this coalition, they have told us that they would be 10 degrees to the right of Netanyahu. That's what they said. It's the actual words of the man who stole the prime ministership, Naftali Bennett. And so now we reached the first test for this coalition, because what came up for a vote is the special clause, the special decree, or the special.
It's a temporary decree.
The special temporary decree, which is a supplement to the law of citizenship. Now, why is this so important? Because Israel does not allow the naturalization of people from enemy states. And ever since Oslo, the Palestinian territories, who are, of course, the Palestinian Authority is our enemy, but not formally so. And so the security reasons for not letting people from the Palestinian territories implement what they call the right of return and gain Israeli citizenship, thus completely undermining the Jewish majority in the state of Israel. And they're doing it through family unification, that is marriage. And now this is portrayed to the Israeli public, especially in the press, which is overwhelmingly left-wing, as if this is a humanitarian thing. Look, these people are in love, and we don't let them set up families. We actually do. A citizen of Israel can get married and unite with his bride on the other side of the
1949 armistice line.
It's not the armistice line, because it's what separates A and B now. Is C areas from B areas. They can go live under the Palestinian Authority. If they wish. And under this banner, what is really going on is that there is a mass attempt to implement what they call the right of return and gain for people from the Palestinian Authority would gain citizenship in Israel. Now, I must say also... Can
I just back up a little bit for 1 second? Sure. Because I think it's important for people to understand. I mean, this is presented as a security measure, and it is a security measure. I think we talked about it last week, because we talked about the fact that Palestinians who have been naturalized as Israeli citizenship due to family reunification are 3 times more likely than native Israeli Arabs to commit terrorist attacks. So this was something that was... I mean, in the 1990s, the government was led by peaceniks, and they were in the thrall of the Oslo process, the peace process that then Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and then Foreign Minister Shimon Peres inaugurated with Yasser Arafat in 1993. And it was supposed to be the era of peace, and the PLO was our partner, and therefore they said that intermarriage between Israeli citizens and citizens of the Palestinian Authority would not be placed in the same category as the marriages between Israeli citizens and citizens of enemy states. And as a result, Palestinians were allowed to get Israeli citizenship and residency rights in Israel as a consequence of marriage to Israelis. So during the 1990s, when all of the peace signings was going on, and we signed deal after deal, and I was a member of the Israeli delegation at the height of the Oslo process as one of the negotiators in the talks as an officer in the army. Nobody checked to see what was happening to these people who were marrying Israeli Arabs. They didn't really care. Everybody wanted to just believe that everything was great. And then what happened was in 2000, Yasser Arafat rejected Palestinian statehood. He launched a jihad against Israel, and hundreds of Israelis were killed, sometimes on a monthly basis, in suicide bombings and roadside shootings and any other manner of mass shootings and mass killings of Israelis by Palestinian terrorists. And Israelis suddenly awoke to the fact that a lot of the people that were carrying out these massacres were Palestinians who had received Israeli citizenship through family reunification laws. So the government at the time, first, the Minister of the Interior at the time, this man named Eli Yishai, signed a temporary order blocking the granting of Israeli citizenship to Palestinian Arabs. And just to get a sense of the dimensions, 120,000 of them received Israeli citizenship. It's an enormous number because there are only about 2 million Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria, and another 1.6 million Palestinians living in the Gaza Strip. So 120,000 is a lot. And so first he put a temporary restraining order on all of the practice of granting citizenship. And then in 2003, the Sharon government and the Knesset passed this temporary order, which was, we're not lawyers, we don't know the exact way to translate it into American legalese, but it's basically an appendix to the citizenship law. But because it's not it didn't go through a formal legislative process, it has to be renewed. This specific order inside of the citizenship law has to be renewed every year. And, there's never been a problem renewing it because Israel's Knesset and Israel's governments have always been majority Zionists. And that's changed with the formation of the Bennett-Lapid government last month. And so they were supposed to, as a matter of course, like Israel has done for the past 18 years or 17 years, they were supposed to just renew this order to prevent mass immigration of Palestinian Arabs into Israel. But they were faced with a reality.
But there's also another nuance here that is crucial, and that because this state was afraid to make the demographic argument because our increasingly fanatically liberal and what I call anti-democratic liberalism, which is the philosophy of our Supreme Court, which is gradually encroaching on Israel's national character, is that they couldn't make the demographic argument because then this is, for them, it's borderline racism to say that we want a Jewish state. So they always had to lean on the security argument. And this opened the gate for many ways to bypass this provision of the law. Because, for instance, now it's an example, for a recent example. They say, well, people over 55 are less likely to commit terrorism. So let's let people over 55 do it. No one has made the argument based on human rights of these women, because part of this is a buying of, is actually trafficking. People who practice polygamy buy cheaply women, young girls in the territories and make them their second, third, fifth, or 10th wife. So we have a Supreme Court who is moving to delegitimize the necessity to preserve a Jewish majority in the Jewish state. So
I think we should get back to that in just a second, but I really want to talk about the drama last night, because the drama last night.
Drama. What I'm saying is hence the drama.
But because I do want to talk more about the demography and actually about what it means that the Supreme Court is so radical. But I want to first get you guys to understand the suspense, the drama, the cast of characters. I mean, it's so Shakespearean, isn't it all? Or maybe Aristophanes. But so basically what happened was we have this government. This government, as Gadi was saying, is comprised of two would-be or self-proclaimed right-wing parties that are supposed to protect Israel's national interest from all of the radicals that they've joined a coalition with. Problem is that the radicals make up 80% of the coalition, or I mean, give or take a few percentages, but they dominate the coalition, much as Ilhan Omar and the Hamas caucus dominates the Democratic Party in Congress. And Naftali Bennett, the super ultra-nationalist, and his sidekick, Interior Minister Ayelet Shaked, are completely beholden to the Muslim Brotherhood elements of the coalition and the anti-Zionist elements of the coalition from the Meretz Party. And so they had this idea, and they've been pushing it for weeks, is that they didn't have their 61-seat bare majority coalition, couldn't get together the votes to pass this routine measure to protect Israel. And so they decided that the way to get it through was by pressuring the opposition, which they're shunning. This entire government is about shunning the right-wing majority of Israel by barring the Likud party, which is the governing party. It's 30 members. The second largest party is only, 17, and Yesh Atid, which is the largest faction in this coalition of Lilliputians that have taken down Gulliver Netanyahu, right? And so they blocked Likud. They've banned the ultra-Orthodox. They've spent the past month in power, or 3 weeks in power, however long it's been, attacking both, and demonizing both. And then they said, you have to save us. If you don't save us, if you don't vote for this measure, then you're unpatriotic, then you're anti-Zionist, never bothering to mention or pay attention to the fact that the reason that we got into this pickle is because they formed an anti-Zionist government. So they've been pushing this campaign, and with the firm support of our radicalized media that says that it would be unpatriotic for the Likud not to serve as the servants of a coalition that exists to annihilate it, and passing this measure. And that's what's really important. And so last night was sort of the showdown time. It was high noon or high midnight. And they had the Likud had left its, cards very close to its chest, what it was going to be doing, what the opposition was going to be doing. And in the end, this is what happened. Ayelet Shaked, because the temporary order expires tomorrow, I think on the 7th of July, she said, well, she was going to bring it to a vote, and by hell or by high water, and the Likud better vote for it, or else they were going to get terrible press and they're going to destroy the country. And the Likud, in the meantime, had said to her, Benjamin Netanyahu offered her a compromise. He said, look, this is untenable, this every year thing, plus the fact that, looking ahead, Yair Lapid, who is a leftist, is supposed to replace the ostensible right-winger Bennett as prime minister in just 2 years. So you don't know, what will happen when he's in charge, whether they're even going to bother to renew this thing. So Likud said, look, we'll agree to extend this provision for an extra 3 months, 2 months, whatever is needed. And in the meantime, we'll work with you to pass a permanent law, a permanent citizenship law that includes this and makes it so that we don't have to renew this every year. We tried to do it in the past. Of course, Ayelet Shaked as Justice Minister blocked it. But, let's work together. Then you'll have a majority. There are 65 members of the right in the Knesset. This is a very large, sizable majority. Work with us, and we'll get through this together. She refused to even sit with them, right?
But let's not pretend. This means that the collapse of their coalition, because there is no way on earth that the Muslim Brotherhood is going to agree to a permanent limit on Palestinian immigration, and Meretz is not going to agree. And Avodah, Avodah Labor is just a Meretz 2 hiding behind a poster of Rabin.
But I don't understand. How can you say that, Gadi? I mean, how could you possibly say that? Are you saying that Naftali Bennett, the ultra-nationalist, along with his sidekick Ayelet Shaked, along with their other, ultra-nationalist partners, the breakaway Likudniks, Gidon Sar, the Justice Minister, Tzvika Hauser, and Yoaz Hendel, and all the Red Zev Elkin, all of these people are just fronts for Muslim Brotherhood-dominated government? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, no.
You'd
Not
never
at all.
say that, would you?
No, but I just wanted to alert our listeners to the fact that Likud knew that Ayelet was in a bind, and this was also aimed at shaking this coalition or even collapsing it, which was so close to happening, which is why you're smiling to yourself now. So I'll let you do the crescendo. What happened?
I hope I'm doing a crescendo. It's been a long time since I quit piano lessons, but let me just say that so the Likud offered her this bargain, which if she were leading a Zionist government, right, she would grab with both arms. She would say, this is a great solution, terrific, because after all, there is a right-wing majority. Now, granted, we formed the coalition we did because we wanted to get rid of the right-wing majority leader, Benjamin Netanyahu. But okay, let's work together for the benefit of for the greater good, for the good of the country, to safeguard everything that we hold dear. But she refused to do that because, as Gadi said, she would have no government then, right? And her government, oddly enough, is completely dominated by the Muslim Brotherhood and by anti-Zionists who threatened to bolt if she dared to go forward. So instead of doing that, like, what is it, 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that? She said, this is going to go through. I'm going to push it through as is. There are not going to be any changes to the temporary order. We're going to vote on it as it exists. I'm not going to agree. I'm not open to extortion from the Muslim Brotherhood, from the United Arab List, RAM. I'm not going to be beholden to them. I'm not going to be beholden to Meretz, which, is an anti-Zionist party. I'm not going to be beholden to them. I'm not going to be beholden to the Arab member of Congress of Knesset from the Labor Party, Imtisan Marana, who dreams of annihilating the city of Zichron Yaakov. No, I'm not going to be beholden to any of these people. I'm just going to put through the order as it is, and let the chips fall where they may. But then, at 3 o'clock in the morning, she presented amendments to the law. So what were those amendments? Did you happen to catch them? Because there were a couple of changes in them as more and more information came out.
It seems that illegally they were hiding some of the information. It's actually illegal because she was going to have the members of Knesset vote on something that they weren't aware of.
That she misrepresented.
And so the bottom line of it is that there are going to be
This is important.
Exceptions.
It's important to go through it. It's important to go through it.
You're enjoying it too much.
Well, it's Schadenfreude. In Hebrew, we have the expression. There's no happiness like the happiness at watching others suffer. So here it goes. So Ayelet Shaked at 3 o'clock in the morning. This is a woman who is reputed to be Israel's version of Margaret Thatcher. This is Israel's Iron Lady. She was a woman of her convictions until she decided she liked Groucho Marx's view of convictions better than Maggie Thatcher's, right? So she changed them at 3 o'clock in the morning. She got new convictions.
How do you say smartut in English?
Yeah, she's a dish towel. She's a dish rag.
This is what a member of Knesset called her from the podium to clap him.
Her former party colleague, right? Yeah. He called her a dish rag. Okay, and just saying. All right, so or maybe like a squeegee, but whatever. So what she said was, her new convictions brought her to the conclusion that no, actually what she was going to do is have exceptions. She claimed that under the compromise that she reached with the Muslim Brotherhood Party, RAM, that she was going to approve the naturalization of 1,600 Palestinians. Then, this morning, the Meretz Arab anti-Zionist regional cooperation minister, Frej, what's his name? Isawi Frej. So he said in an interview with Arab radio, which we're not supposed to know about because he said it in Arabic, but he said, well, actually there were 3,000 people who were supposed to be immediately naturalized in her compromise, but we didn't want to tell anybody because we didn't want to empower the right. So it would
scare the right.
It's nearly doubling what she said, from 1,600 to 3,000. Then later it came out that no, actually it was 5,000. We don't know the actual number, but what is clear enough is that they were presenting a law not as written, but as they wanted it to be considered, which is, as Gadi said, illegal. At any rate, the 1600 was enough, right? It was enough because it showed that the principle had just been broken, that now we have an anti-Zionist dominated government that cannot pass a law, a temporary law, albeit, but it can't pass just basic Zionist legislation that protects Israel from a national security perspective and protects Israel's Jewish character, national character. They're simply incapable of doing so because of the nature of the beast. They're a government that is dominated by the Hamas wing of the Knesset.
So the situation is when the drama comes. Let me just make sure.
So you give the conclusion, right? No, exactly.
No, you'll give the conclusion.
You give Act 3.
Let me lay out.
You give Act 3. Give Act 3. Give Act 3. Give Act 3.
So when we reach this vote, there's the coalition in which there is a tiny Zionist minority, and in order,
a tiny Zionist minority.
In the coalition.
Oh, you mean 12? Yes, the 20%.
Yeah. So they're a minority in their own left-wing coalition, and their left-wing coalition does not want this amendment to be enacted. So she gives more and more and more concessions to the Muslim Brotherhood and to Meretz. This is not enough because 2 of the Ram people would not vote for it under any circumstances. So in order to save face, she needs the coalition to vote for her. And this is like, these people are children. It's like they're the coalition, but they think that their job is to throw out the opposition. It's like still, it's Netanyahu's responsibility. They're the government. They're setting a government up with a Muslim Brotherhood, and now they're fuming at Likud for not saving them. But what happened is that the right-wing bloc, which is the opposition, voted against this because it wants the government out and because of all the concession that she made. And the extreme left also voted against it. And they were left in the final counting with 1 member, Amichai Shikli, who became the deciding casting vote. And because of the concessions, he said, he voted with the right. And so the coalition, it was also made into a confidence vote. So the coalition met its first challenge and completely failed, where everybody said it would fail. Nothing unites this coalition except that they hate Bibi. And therefore, and when they formed it, they said, oh, we will only deal with civil matters. We will postpone all the politics. But politics doesn't wait for them. So the time came, the vote came, and in the early morning hours, it was a 59-59 vote, a tie, and they couldn't extend the provision. And now they're saying that Likud has betrayed Zionism.
Right. And it's important to note that even though they lost the vote, the no confidence measure couldn't pass because there aren't 61 votes. In 120 votes, Knesset, you need 61 votes to positively vote no confidence in a government in order to it to fall. So we're still in the same conundrum we've been in since the elections in March, which is that you can't, because Naftali Bennett and his party are motivated by, just a will to power and megalomania. And Gideon Sa'ar and his party are motivated by a psychotic hatred of Netanyahu. We can't get 2 defectors to sign on to a no confidence vote. So they can lose bills, they can lose on laws, but they cannot lose power. And one of the main concerns that I have, and I'm sure is shared by you, although we do relish this victory, is twofold. One is this is a Pyrrhic victory because the same Ayelet Shaked now will have to reject citizenship applications from the Palestinians, and she's going to be afraid to do so because anybody that she rejects is going to immediately cause a coalition crisis. So she may become a rubber stamp for that. And secondly, as time goes by and it becomes more and more clear that Naftali and Ayelet and Gideon Sa'ar and Zev Elkin and all of their ilk have replaced their convictions with new ones to justify, from an ideological perspective, their political treachery. They're going to have less and less personal angst from betraying their voters. They're going to be fine with that increasingly, because that's just the nature of the beast. Once you've taken that step in the direction of treachery, you've already walked out the door. And so that's a real problem.
Yeah, and the final irony was that Ayelet Shaked wrote, you see, now the Likud is voting with the joint Arab list against this provision to protect Zionism. So she's in a coalition with the Muslim Brotherhood, but since the votes against it came from the two sides of the spectrum, she's now blaming Likud for cooperating in the opposition with an Arab party.
And again, the thing here, because, and it's important in a way to point out how obscene this is, because nothing is clear anymore, because we're living in a world of lies, where what the media reports is very far from the truth, and deliberately so. It's very important to point out that Ayelet and Naftali made their bed with the Muslim Brotherhood and with Meretz and with the Labor Party. They chose this coalition. They didn't have to. In fact, everybody expected them not to, but they did, along with Gideon Sa'ar and his party. The Likud did not choose who it was going to be in the opposition with. They didn't come to an agreement with the joint Arab list, which supports Iran and the Hezbollah and Assad and all the rest of it, and obviously the PLO. They didn't sit with them and say, let's work together to undermine this government. They just found themselves there because this entire coalition exists in order to deny the will of the voters that wanted Benjamin Netanyahu to remain prime minister. So the whole concept that this is that Likud willed itself to work with the joint Arab list is in and of itself just the height of sanctimony and dishonesty. But again, we've come to expect it from the likes of Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked. But I do want to just point out, just so people understand how horrible this is all for the country. So we were talking about the fact that this measure has two purposes. One is security and one is demographic. Israel is the only Jewish state. It is the only non-Muslim state from its border with the Jordan River to Pakistan. And so demography is a very big deal. And obviously, the way that Israel has always been able to secure its Jewish majority, there are two ways. One, and the most important way, is through Jewish immigration, right? The fact is that we have the law of return, which was, I think, the second law that was passed by the Knesset right after Israel won the War of Independence in 1949. And the law of return grants full freedom of immigration to every Jew on earth to the Jewish state. And so that law has brought in millions and millions of Jews from the four corners of the earth to Israel, yours truly being one of them. But that's always been the basis of Israel's very large Jewish majority. We have about 79% of Israel's population is Jewish. The other way that we've prevented Israel from being overcome by non-Jews and losing its national identity as a Jewish state is through immigration law, and by enforcing our borders, by not just letting everybody come in. And one of the things that we've seen in this whole post-nationalist push by the transnationalist left, right, is a rejection, is an attempt to claim that national identity, whether it's Jewish or American or Polish or British or French or anything else, that anybody who aspires to maintain and preserve their national identity is necessarily a racist. And since the Jews were the first people who ever self-consciously determined their identity as a nation, we did it at Mount Sinai with the Ten Commandments in the Bible. Israel is sort of the prototypical nation state, and both due to anti-Semitism and due to the fact that we're the most natural nation state on earth, We've received, we were the first people on the chopping block of the communists and the Soviet Union, and then threw them into the cultural Marxism of the international left, being referred to as racists for our nationalism. And that, of course, was ensconced most formally in 1975 in the Zionism is Racism UN General Assembly Resolution 3379. So we've been at and now this has been universally rejected across, the board in Israel, obviously, and in the United States as well, and in other countries too. And it was, in fact, it was repealed in the United Nations in 1991. The problem is that Israel's elite ruling class, that is most powerfully found in our judiciary and in our legal system, actually embraces that idea. It actually embraces that idea that there's something inherently racist about Jewish nationalism. And I dare say all nationalisms, but lucky for everybody else on the earth, they're not the judges in the Supreme Court of the United States or any other country. They're here. And they actually agree, or they at least adjudicate on the basis of agreeing with the UN General Assembly resolution that was repealed in 1991 that claims that Zionism is a form of racism. So that the fear of our elected leaders is that if they pass a citizenship law that takes an active measure in blocking the naturalization of citizens of the Palestinian Authority as Israelis, that the Supreme Court will say that it's illegal, that it's unconstitutional. Not that we have a constitution, but that they'll say that, and that they'll cancel the law, claiming that it's racist. So that we've gotten to the point in Israel with our legal fraternity, with our legal tyranny, that the Knesset hides behind national security as a means to prevent the mass immigration of foreign or hostile non-Jewish populations into the Jewish state. They can't simply do it outright. And I think it's a statement not only of what we're up against in Israel, but really I think what happens here tends to be a laboratory that then is exported around the Western world by the same Western NGOs that are funding a lot of the radicalization of Israeli law, of Israel's legal fraternity, and then it's being brought into the United States, and it's being brought into the EU.
But it's also the exact same argument everywhere, because everywhere where the radical left, I'm uncomfortable with the term left here for various reasons. Let's call them the radical progressives, as they call themselves. They always make the argument that anyone who wants to restrict any kind of immigration is a racist. And so we have the front to save South Tel Aviv, right, with the Shefi Paz, when we mentioned the 70-year-old combative lesbian who was once a LGBT activist and is now like on the radical right, is labeled a racist, though she is against illegal immigration from everywhere. But it's most convenient to point at the African immigrants and say, oh, it's because they're black. And it's the same thing with Tommy Robinson in England, and it's the same thing with Donald Trump in America. Everywhere, any Western country when you try to restrict immigration,
or Orban in Hungary,
you're labeled a racist. And this is because what they are systematically doing is they are targeting nationalism, and they are moving to do the same thing they did with Zionism. That the aim is to portray nationalism as fascism. And then the next step in this argument is what I call anti-democratic liberalism, because they then say that the masses are nationalists and therefore racist, and so giving them political power is a permanent danger of fascism. And this is why we need to have responsible adults, for instance, in the courts or international forums, or in the ICC, the International Criminal Court in The Hague, or in the UN or other places where China can dominate, so that we can take power away from these dangerous citizens, because the crux of the argument is that the greatest danger to democracy is citizens.
It's really funny because then that brings us back to Naftali Bennett. And what on earth is he doing here, right? I mean, he was the CEO of the Council of Israeli Communities in Judea and Samaria as his first major independent gig in public life before, after Netanyahu fired him from being his bureau chief when Netanyahu was head of the opposition in 2005, 2006, or 2006, 2007. So what is he doing here with these post-nationalists? And I think, our publisher and friend Rotem Sella was on a television show with me last Thursday, and he made a very compelling point. He said with Naftali, he feels, he didn't put it this way, but I'll just put what Rotem said into the framework of what we were talking about, because what he said was essentially, Naftali decided that he wants to use the bureaucracy, wants to use democratic tricks of in the Knesset to replace the people. Naftali is a megalomaniac. He has put himself forward as prime ministerial candidate, really since he joined politics as the head of the religious Zionist party in 2013. And he has always been presenting himself as a prime ministerial candidate. And, in the last two, I think, elections out of the series of four that we've had, he's openly called himself a candidate for prime minister. Now, we don't have direct elections for the prime minister, but in all the polls that were asking people who would they prefer from a slate of candidates, Netanyahu has always beaten Naftali Bennett by a minimum of 20 points, right? So, there was never any polling data that suggested that the public wanted him. There was never any polling data of the relative strength of the parties that he led to make anybody believe that he had a chance of ever beating Netanyahu at the ballot box. But nonetheless, he put himself forward repeatedly as a candidate for prime minister, and the public kept rejecting him. He just consistently rejecting him, refused to even consider bringing him in as prime minister, with a massive gap. This time Yamina, his party, had 7 seats in the Knesset to Likud's 30, right? I mean, it's more than 4 times more. And yet, he still thinks that he's a legitimate prime minister. And the reason is because he just said, well, what the people think isn't important, right? It's not even a suggestion. I don't care. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a deal. I'm going to get the position of prime minister in exchange for giving away everything that I ran on. And I'm going to make a deal with Yair Lapid that gives me that job. And that's a job I want. And I don't care what the people say. I'm replacing the people with parliamentary tricks. And so there you see, in a way, it's like Liz Cheney. She has no position in the Republican Party. She's not going to get reelected probably from West Virginia to serve in Congress. So instead, she said, well, I don't care what any of you think. You're all fascists. I'm going to vote for second impeachment, even though there's no evidence of any high crime or misdemeanor on the part of the outgoing president. And even though he's not going to be serving in office by the time that the Senate Senate trial rolls around, the Chief Justice thinks this is such a farce that he won't even preside over the Senate trial. So, she said, I'm going with the Democrats. Now she's on the January 6th commission that Nancy Pelosi has concocted to try to criminalize all Republicans. So, Naftali is sort of an Israeli Never Trumper, an Israeli Liz Cheney, where he says, I don't care what my voters think. I don't care at all. I was able to maneuver and to exploit loopholes in the system. And the fact that I share with the ruling class on the left an undying desire to oust Netanyahu from power, because as I see it, he's the principal obstacle to the public recognizing how wonderful I am, the wonder of me, the miracle of me, that I am I am what they've been dreaming of all of their lives. I am the hope that they desire. I am everything, and I am omnipotent, and I am perfect. And the minute that I oust mean old nasty old Bibi, everything was going to be great. So I think that here we see, he, like they, rejects the people. He thinks the people are passe. They won't vote for me, and therefore I'm just going to cancel them out. They're no longer important. Voters aren't important, which is why I think that even though, yesterday's vote or, the early morning of today's vote, what was, it may very well have been, the first step on the path to overthrowing this government. As long as this government sticks around, the longer it sticks around with each passing day, Naftali is going to try harder or less and less hard, to hide the fact that as of today, he stands before us a man without convictions, but very firmly on the left.
Yeah, so we started this on a happy note, but it's not a happy
But
subject.
it's a very unhappy subject, but I am optimistic
I
because
saw
the
you.
fact
I saw
is,
you. I saw optimism on your Twitter feed this morning. So
I was so happy.
Would you explain that, please? This is so out of line, Carolyn.
Right, but the reason is because they didn't win, because they can't pass anything, because they can't get anything done, because the public at the end of the day does have a say in the Knesset, and because they can't make their points, and because one final reason is because they're exposed. I think more and more the people who still support them on the right, who still think, who hate Netanyahu just like they do, the people in Judea and Samaria, where I live, the religious Zionist people, all my neighbors who 43% they got 43% of the vote in Efrat, my community, right? That more and more people are realizing that they've been had. And they've seen it in two ways. They saw, everybody was upholding this fake deal on the community of Eviatar that we talked about last week, that voluntarily evacuated on the basis of a deal that Naftali and Ayelet claimed that they had made that was going to enable this community to leave now but come back really, really quickly. And this week, Foreign Minister Yair Lapid said that there was no such deal and that Eviatar is not likely to be reinstated anytime soon, so there's nothing to worry about, which I wrote about in Israel Hayom last week, and I foresaw this from happening, and it took him 2 days to expose that in fact Carolyn Glick was right, and that everybody that was praising them was living on La La Land. And I think that got a lot of people thinking. And then this latest thing, with Ayelet Shaked essentially giving, opening up the floodgates of Palestinian naturalization in Israel, is very, and Naftali Bennett joining her in this is very much a signal that there's a lot to be concerned about. And the more people recognizing this, I think the more difficult it will be going forward for this government.
There was an argument made by those who share our opinions, and yet said it was not visible in the Knesset. But some people said, look, this is not the right subject to pick on because this will be a Pyrrhic victory. You'll shake the coalition, but you would not stop the naturalization of Palestinians through family unification. And by the time this controversy is over, there will be 50,000 more naturalized in Israel. And I must say that gave me pause. I finally came down on the end, on the side of rejecting this deal, partly because it was menukav. It was pierced with so many concessions to the Muslim Brotherhood that it made little difference. But it is, and this will be the dilemma, because what they gambled on is that the Likud is patriotic, and so whenever there'd be a critical thing, their commitment to the radical left will be annulled by the fact that Likud will vote from the opposition. So partly what experienced parliamentarians were said, we had to show them on the first step that they cannot count on Likud. And so now they're going to eat the stew that they've cooked, but the problem is we might all be going to be eating the stew that they cooked.
I agree. Look, that's what happens when you have an anti-Zionist government in charge, right? And I think that the overwhelming sense that I had all along with this, because obviously, your visceral feelings, of course, you have to vote for this, right? But this government is so dangerous by its very existence that everything has to be done to overthrow it, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we simply cannot abide by a situation where people who think that Israel has no right to exist and who make common cause with Israel's enemies are in charge. It's just too dangerous. And so the danger that you get from one law is in a way, it's overwhelmed by this cascade of dangers that exist on every level, because you have a government that is led formally by an empty suit. Well, no, actually by a whore in the case of Naftali Bennett. And sorry, but it's true. I mean, what do you call somebody who sells out to the highest bidder? I think you call
we have
them a
one
whore,
whore
right?
and one dish rag. So
no. You have one whore, and you have an empty suit in Yair Lapid, who is both an imbecile and motivated mainly by the praise that he hopes to always receive from the Biden administration, which is anti-American. It's this government, but on a much grander scale. And here, I think we should come to Iran, which was another subject that I wanted to talk about, because I just don't feel like we can, even though, this is in a way more fun to talk about because we did get a victory, even if it's a Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhic victories are still victories. And so we like them, we'll take them if that's all we can get. But, I mean, that's how desperate we become. We prefer Pyrrhic victories to another defeat. But, Tony Blinken, Secretary of State of the United States of America, just announced this week that the United States was ending sanctions on 3 Iranians that the Trump administration sanctioned for their role in September of 20, for their role in Iran's ballistic missiles program. And so here, the thing that's notable here is that it's twofold. I'm actually writing my Newsweek article about this. It's twofold. One is that the Biden administration is signaling desperation, right? I mean, President Biden pledged that he wasn't going to lower sanctions on Iran so long as they don't go back into the nuclear deal, right? So what he said on that Sunday morning program. And here they are, removing sanctions from Iran, and Iran has not at all gotten close to agreeing to the nuclear deal. And the other thing is that they're doing this after Ebrahim Raisi, who's the Chief Justice of Iran's judiciary, was just elevated in another, fake election to serve as the next president of Iran, and he's going to be inaugurated next month. And Raisi is interesting both for the message that his elevation sends to the Iranian public and also to the Biden administration. The Iranian public, it says, look, this guy is a mass murderer. You know that. In 1988, he presided over and in some cases took active part in the execution, torture, rape of 30,000 Iranians, including many, many children. 30,000, that's 30 times 1,000. 30,000 Iranian citizens were murdered by this man in 1988. And subsequently, as he rose in the ladder in Iran's judiciary, he presided over, he doomed to death through his judgment thousands of other Iranian political dissidents. So this is a mass murder. He's a psychopath. And Khamenei wants him to take over as Ayatollah, apparently, after Khamenei finally kicks the bucket. And so Raisi has now been elevated from the head of the judiciary to the presidency of Iran. And so to the Iranian people who today are out in the streets protesting, you have the petroleum industry workers have been on strike now for 10 days. You have people throughout the country who are protesting in the streets because of water shortages and electrical power outages. The country is on the verge of economic collapse because of all of these things. And so by bringing in Raisi, Khamenei is telling them, in 2 weeks, your vacation is over, we're going to start mass killing again. Not that they ever stopped, but this is a very clear message to the Iranian people that another age of repression is about to begin, and that this regime will stop at nothing to protect itself. And to the Biden administration saying, we hold you in utter contempt. We expect you to give us money That's it. We want money from you. And here the Western media is so brain dead, right, that they're saying, well, they're repeating. Oh, Raisi said that he is fine with continuing the negotiations towards Iran's return to the nuclear deal. Now, of course he is, because if they return to the nuclear deal, they're not going to stop any of their illicit nuclear activities. They're still going to be racing to the nuclear finish line, and the Biden administration knows that. But if they agree to go back to the limitations on their nuclear activities as prescribed by the JCPOA, which of course all of them end by 2030, most of them end in 4 years by 2025, then they get upfront, I think $90 billion in sanctions relief, and another $50 billion in expected revenues from the restoration of their oil exports with the abrogation of U.S. Sanctions. So that,
and one thing they've learned is that no matter how much they would spit on the American administration, it will only say it's raining, because its whole frame of mind is a narcissistic one where the hatred of the other is just our fault. So if we behave, they'll stop hating us. It's a classic example of the soft bigotry of low expectations. They don't even take them seriously. But these guys, these Iranians, they're very serious about their religious fundamentalism. They do believe that America is the big Satan, and America is not listening. They're negotiating while they're calling them Satans, not to say that they're attacking them with drones and missiles in Iraq.
You know, it's funny. I mean, it's not funny, but I mean, just to show how horrific all of this is, and to give you, our beloved viewers and listeners, a sense of just how maniacal, how psychopathic Raisi is. So, and how serious he is about his genocidal faith. In 1988, when he was busy killing 30,000 people, a lot of those people were women and girls, and so he ordered that they all be raped before they were murdered, because according to Islamic tradition, virgins go to heaven. And he wanted to make sure that none of them were virgins, because he was sending the message to the Iranian people that anybody who questions in any way the regime is doomed to eternal damnation. And you don't do that really. I mean, you do that if you're a sadist and you know, whatever, but he is a fanatic. He believes this stuff. You know, he ordered the mass rape of women and girls in 1988 because he believes in eternal damnation.
But the Biden administration is horrified by the murder of Khashoggi.
Right. Well, that just, again, that shows,
on human rights grounds. Yeah,
it just shows how fanatical on the other side the Biden administration is. Because at this point, there's no moral justification of any sort. There's isn't going to lead to peace, and there's no denying that it's going to lead to war. There's no denying that it's going to lead to the world's greatest sponsor of terrorism acquiring a nuclear arsenal within in just a couple of years. There's no denying it. There's no denying that this is a regime that has caused and will continue to cause mass murder of its own people and of everybody that stands in its path to global supremacy. Yeah. There's no way to justify it.
Not to mention a nuclear arms race that this would trigger in the Middle East. And then there are a lot of crazies in this region and a lot of money. And these people are going to acquire bombs, and it's going to be like their new pet toy. And this is really dangerous when people are fanatics who think that, you know, if you kill Jews, you go to heaven. What then if there are single suicide bombers? How far is that from collective suicide decided by fanatic leaders? It's a real danger here.
It's very dangerous. And, you know, and I don't want to, I want the focus here to be on the Biden administration, because they're the ones that are perpetrating this. I think it's a crime against humanity. I mean, you know, people say their own war on guns, right? Is that, oh, let's go after the gun manufacturer, right? Let's not hold criminals accountable for their actions. Let's say that guns are accountable, right? Well, here, they're the ones putting the guns. They're the ones putting the ballistic missiles. They're the ones putting the nuclear weapons. They're the ones putting billions and billions of dollars into the hands of psychotic Islamofascists, right? Who seek to commit genocide, not only of their own fellow Iranians, but of all the Jews, of the Sunnis, of the United States of America, of the American people. They're putting these guns in the hands of these murderers by pushing forward with this nuclear diplomacy that is insane, that is, again, morally unjustifiable, strategically insane by any measure. But we have to go for a second to our strategically illiterate government, because they said, before they even formed this godforsaken thing called the government, they said that they didn't, that Netanyahu was wrong for disputing America, or disagreeing or opposing U.S. policy on Iran publicly, and that there weren't going to be any disagreements between us and the Biden administration that we're going to be making public. We're good friends. We share the same values. I don't share the same values, by the way, as most of the people who are pushing or any of the people who are pushing this policy in the Biden administration. My values tell me that you don't appease mass murderers. That's like against my values. So what I'm saying is that we have to be able to oppose this, to defy the Americans. And our government is so sure that the problem with the Americans is that Netanyahu wasn't nice to them. And so they're saying, we're not Netanyahu. We're going to be nice to the Democrats, whose animosity towards Israel and towards Jews, began with the primary, the anti-Semitic primary that Ned Lamont, the current governor of Connecticut, waged against Joe Lieberman in 2006. That was the first time that it came out from the woodwork, the anti-Semitism of the Democrat Party. And by the way, he was supported by Hillary Clinton, who was senator in New York. But they're saying that the problem, and Netanyahu wasn't prime minister, he was the head of the opposition. So here they're saying that it's all Netanyahu's fault that the Democrats have become Corbynized, that the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party sets the policy of the party. And we're going to be nice to Biden and everything's going to be fine. We're not going to defy them on Iran and then they're going to stop abusing Iran. None of this is true. And at this moment in our history, it's very dangerous that these people are in power.
Yeah.
Again, dude, it really sucks, man. It just sucks.
No, I was thinking, here we are ending on a sad note again. Yeah, we don't want to get anyone's hopes up.
No, but on the other hand, we did have a victory yesterday, and actually there is another lesson to be learned from this victory yesterday, and the reason why it's important. First of all, like I said, and like we say every week when we're talking to people and we're telling you guys, you got to subscribe to us. Let's get the truth out. Let's win this battle for the war of ideas. You can only do it by getting the truth out. And then we get all of these emails from our viewers who say, Carolyn, I love you, but, I watch you and I kind of want to slit my wrists after your show. So, could you try to lighten up a little bit, please? So here's the thing. We had a victory yesterday, and it's an important victory. It's not really a Pyrrhic victory, because if they had passed this law yesterday with Likud support, they didn't want Likud support. They wanted to keep this coalition together, and that's why she made the compromise with the United Arab List. And that was why, because she's more interested in maintaining her grip on power, she and he, Ayelet Shaked and Naftali Bennett.
Because they have nowhere to go. Because this is their only chance of survival. They've crossed the lines, and they think, I don't know who advised them on these topics, but they think now that they would get their next time they run for election, they would have left-wing voters voting for them. The left has just chewed them and will spit them out in the next round. So
the thing is that I actually believe that they're not going to be able to really move forward with a lot of the things they want to do. I mean, it's true that you need 61 votes to pass and to bring down the government. But here's just a thought. Naftali Bennett is supposed to go to Washington in a couple of weeks, and I consider that to be a major danger, because he's not capable of protecting any of Israel's interests, because like you said, he has no past. He burned his bridges to the past. He has no future. Nobody will vote for him. All he has is the present. And therefore, he has zero leverage room with, power over Biden. And it's going to be very, very bad. But it'll be very difficult for him to go.
Yeah.
It'll be very difficult for him to go because he leaves the country. Probably other members of Knesset are going to have to be coming with him and his entourage. I mean, he's supposed to go to the UN General Assembly meeting in September.
And he's going with Yair Lapid.
Right. And Lapid won't let him go alone, And so the minute that he leaves the country, the minute that any of the ministers of this government leave the country, they know that the Likud is going to foment a no confidence vote and they're going to lose it. So, that's my sense. We've started a ball in motion towards overturning this government. This is good news. This was a good week for us. Come on, this is what it means to be in the opposition. Small, secrete victories that lead to the overthrow of the government and new elections. Anyway, that's our view. That's my view. Is that your view? I don't know. Maybe it's not your view.
Mostly it's my view, yeah. I've come around. Carl, I'm a veteran of the left. It was a long journey for me to be sitting here in agreement with Caroline Glick.
Oh my God. It's really scary, right? It's terrible.
It used to be.
Works out I'm okay and I'm a pretty good cook, right? Anyway, so listen.
I like your pizza.
There you go. We'll talk soon. I make Chicago deep dish pizza, guys, just so you know. It's on a YouTube video. I got it from YouTube. You can make it too. Anyway, we'll talk to you next week.
Sign with a new recipe.
Right. Sign up, subscribe to our videos, and tell all of your friends, subscribe them to willingly or unwittingly, wittingly or unwittingly. And we will see you next week. Take care. Bye.
Bye, Caroline. Bye-bye.